Chapter 171 to 173. Welcome in Konoha, Miss Kona. Hiruzen greeted the representative of Bairi, a pale-skinned woman with shoulder-long blue hair, clad in an azure kimono as her discerning and sharp amber eyes glanced right and left from person to person, measuring them. Hiruzen's stomach sank at the sight. He never expected the negotiator would be the previous president of the Biribiri Company. Konan, or as she was known by her alias, Na Kona, came to Konoha to negotiate the reimbursement KasiCair would receive for the attempt to kidnap a member of the Yukimi clan, the founding clan of KasiCair, and a blatant attack on the village, which was actually a breach of the peace treaty signed after the Third Ninja War between all the ninja villages. Most villages in one form or another broke the treaty, but the important thing was to keep it all hush-hush. If it came to the light and was important enough, a situation like this could easily happen. Konan couldn't help but grit her teeth hard in order to prevent herself from mockingly grinning like a loon, and she was still unable to wipe the smile from her face completely. The most she managed was to keep her lips set in a small, gentle smile. Normally, an accusation such as this would mean shit and would be completely ignored. Normally, Konan would be laughed off with some crap-like excuse from the Hokage, and that would be it, but Ray really had a good idea with making Bairi the picture of neutrality and making connections with every important daimyo family there is. One word from us, and suddenly, this became the talk of the year. Better yet, nobody can accuse us of siding with KasiCair, much less being the one who orchestrated all of this. I mean, what could possibly be our reason to do so, right? Konan mirthfully thought while exchanging pleasantries with Hokage and his council. The Biribiri Company was simply too important to ignore, and so this entire thing was blown out of proportion so fast. Konoha had no time to counterattack. A mere dispute between Konoha and KasiCair became something every country closely watched. This was the closest the countries got to the start of the Fourth Ninja War since the Third ended. Konoha was weakened beyond belief after the Kyuubi attack, and only the peace treaty and Hiruzen's swift orders to strengthen the borders prevented the war from breaking out again right after that incident. God knows Kumo certainly wanted to jump at Konoha at the earliest opportunity. And now, who would have thought Konoha would have the guts to blatantly break the peace treaty when that piece of paper was half the reason why Kumo and IWA sat tight in their villages instead of marching to Konoha and razing it to the ground out of sheer spite? The reason why Konan found this situation so hilarious was that she knew Konoha was completely innocent in the matter. After all, it was her who took Yuriko away from KasiCair, and Yuriko was in no way a happy citizen as it was portrayed in the complaint. The supposed root ninja was just Mei in disguise, and yet, Konoha was unable to say anything in their defense because of the division in the village. Heck, most Jonin doesn't even know that Root existed. Danzo can say his Root didn't do it all he wanted, but Hiruzen has no idea what Root actually does. He knows nothing about their missions, and Danzo's assurances were, quite literally, worthless in this situation. Even if Danzo let the Yanbiyu search through Root headquarters and gave all documentation to Hokage, which he would never do, it would not help because a simple, "you must be hiding the documents or you already destroyed them," would suffice to completely shut him up. There was simply no proof Root didn't do it, and at this point, it didn't even matter if Root actually was responsible. Konoha had to grit their teeth and pay up to prevent a war they were in no shape to fight. I must say, I am very grateful to the Biribiri Company for stepping in and preventing a war from breaking out because of this incident, Miss Kona, Hiruzen amiably said, gesturing at a pre-prepared chair for Konan. Kana chuckled, unable to keep it in. The man was actually thanking her. No, war would simply postpone too many of our projects, so we decided to step in and use our influence to resolve this dispute between Konoha and KasiCair. Konan answered while shaking her head as she sat down on the luxurious chair. Any Konoha ninja would know Konan was somebody important the second he got to know she received a chair in front of the council. In order to show their importance, anyone answering to the council was left standing in front of them. Well then, gentlemen, Konan took the lead in the discussion. She crossed her legs and put her hands on her knees while leaning her body slightly forward as her amber eyes gleamed in excitement. Shall we begin the negotiation? Konan naturally didn't come to Konoha alone. She was supposed to be an important person, and that meant a bunch of bodyguards and attendants. These people were currently housed at the best hotel in the village, finally resting after a long trip. It was already evening when they arrived in Konoha, and they knew they would probably stay a few days in the village until the negotiations were over. Moreover, tomorrow, Konan will most likely assign them some kind of work, so they wanted to enjoy their free time to the fullest while they could. Only one of Konan's tagalongs did not share this mindset. Ringo sneaked out of her room, clad in black clothes heading to fulfill her own mission, while Konan provided a distraction by requesting the council to gather despite it being practically already a night. Everybody is so focused on these negotiations. Even the patrols are lighter than what they normally should be. Ringo thought as she slipped past two Chunins hidden on a rooftop, watching the still busy street. She basically stood only a few meters away from them, but Ringo was not one of the best Kiri assassins for nothing. The Chunins had no idea she was ever there. Correction. Konoha is just incompetent, continuing through the empty back alleys and occasionally using rooftops to get to her target. Ringo finally landed in a crouch on the rooftop next to the orphanage, staying hidden for an entire hour as she observed the surroundings. Done with observation, her eyes darted to the right, towards an old house opposite the orphanage. While narrowing the first set of guards, she spotted the ninjas occasionally taking a peek through the window. Ringo clicked her tongue as she looked to the left where a restaurant was located. Two watching from there. These two were actually very well hidden, and only their unnatural interest in the orphanage gave them away. And if my chakra sensing is true, 3 more are hidden inside the orphanage. Dom, this is pain. Ringo quietly complained to herself as her body started to move again. While she was observing the situation, a clone of hers disguised herself with makeup and found a spot close by the 2 observers in the restaurant. Getting a signal from the original, it quickly used an invisible chakra string to trip a nearby waitress, causing her to spill the contents of her tray right onto the disguised ninjas. Needless to say, both of the observers quickly stopped paying attention to the orphanage when their hair was full of sticky noodles. The 2 in the restaurant solved. Only the 2 in the house opposite the orphanage became a problem. Well, not really. They only looked out of the window occasionally, unlike the 2 in the restaurant, who stared at the building almost religiously. Ringo simply sneaked inside the orphanage right after the ninja behind the window turned around. And I only have to avoid the 3 nuisances inside, she thought as she silently walked through the dark hall. By now, it was way past curfew and the children were already asleep while the workers could be heard talking in the kitchen, the only lit room in the whole building. Ringo simply silently ran like a shadow around the open door to the kitchen, heading towards the room with the younger kids. Finally getting to the door behind which her target slept, she could feel 3 adult presences inside. Suddenly, Ringo's smile widened into a predatory grin when one of them felt somehow emotionless. Let's see how this will work. Crane, a member of Konoha ENBU, was watching the young 2-year-old Jinchuriki sleeping after yet another day of being rejected by the kids and caretakers alike. It was a bit of a bother to stay silently put in the corner and observe the kid. Really, for 2 years nobody even came close to threaten his life, and yet he and Bear had to watch him. Maybe it's time to finally resign from ENBU? Crane contemplated, knowing well he took this mission upon himself because he was as lazy as any Nara. After all, 2 years of peace in ENBU? He basically exploited the situation to make his career skyrocket. And suddenly his eyes were attracted to a closet inside the room where a small amount of lightning crackled. Crane's eyes widened as he realized, shit, we are not alone. Before he could even attempt to sign his companion, Bear, to be silent, a man wearing a mask with root on the forehead ran out of the closet and in one move jumped outside through the window. The 2 Konoha ANBU watched dumbfounded for a second before their brains rebooted and both promptly gave chase. Ringo stepped into the room through the door, amusedly watching both guards running after the root operative. Honestly, she thought one would stay behind to watch the kid, but she was apparently wrong. Well, an easier job for me, I guess. She shrugged and approached the sleeping blonde kid. Putting her pointing finger on his forehead, Ringo flared her chakra into her hand, activating the seal put there by Rei before she left Yuzushio. She watched as the kanji from the seal slithered down her hand onto the kid's forehead, where they set themselves in a circle before promptly disappearing under his skin. Rei said he has no idea what to expect from this kid, Ringo whispered to the sleeping boy, but I hope, for your own sake, you won't end up like me. Brainwashed and willing to sacrifice yourself for ungrateful ingrates who couldn't be bothered to throw you away on the first opportunity after you lose your usefulness. I guess, only time will tell. Ringo turned around and silently left. The rest was not her problem. Rei and Pakra were having a picnic on a grassy hill near the Uzushio village, both somewhat awkwardly pondering how to start a light-hearted conversation. Damn, Rei chuckled. This is harder than I thought. I think this is actually the first time we are truly alone. Pakura worked as Rei's Jonin commander, which currently, while the village was not yet built, meant she temporarily took the role of his secretary. The problem between them became quickly apparent. Despite Pakura's obvious affection towards Rei, they were both used to being professional towards each other, so now that they were alone, it was hard to have a casual talk. It was actually Conan who was responsible for the current situation. Pakura got surprisingly along well with the resident Bluinette, who was also of the strict and no-nonsense type during work. Their similar personality and approach towards work made the 2 girls close, considering they both worked together on many projects. And since Conan was the best at psychology out of Rei's girls, she quickly noticed Pakura's feelings. Well, at least she did so sooner than others. Noticing it didn't require any psychoanalytical skills, really. Pakura sucked at hiding her feelings in every meeting that didn't pertain to her job, so once she started spending some time with Rei and his girls during her free time, the cat was out of the bag pretty fast. It was only a half-year later after Pakura's arrival when Conan noted Rei started to notice Pakura more. At first, it was just a few additional glances, but the 2 were clearly being drawn to each other. And yet, Rei refused to make any advances despite all 4 of his girls giving him their blessing. After all, even now, he was run ragged by his projects, whether in sealing or in the village creation. And on top of that, he had to find time for all 4 of his girls. Well, Rei was not complaining. Work could go stuff itself. For Rei, his girls were his priority, but still, time was precious, and getting involved with yet another woman? Rei didn't really think he had time for that. As such, 2 days before she left for Konoha, Conan took the situation into her own hands, and somehow, here they were. Rei and Pakura were ordered to go on a picnic date with a no-nonsense, I dare you to disobey kind of tone. If it works, it works. If not, at least you know where you stand with each other, she said, Rei thought as he side-glanced at the fidgeting woman sitting next to him. Yeah, whatever. How is training Maki going? Rei started. He really had no idea what else than their work to talk about with Pakura. With his girls, it was just so easy as they always had a common topic, but now. Pakura furrowed her brows, not expecting such a question, and her mind slightly panicked as she hurried to create a coherent answer. It is fine? She said unsurely, making Rei chuckle, which only made Pakura fidget nervously even more. Seeing her state, Rei decided to help her out a bit. He knew Pakura had no time to spend on interaction with males, and he had more experience from dates with his girls, so Rei put his hand on hers, squeezing it slightly in the reassuring manner, and when Pakura's face snapped in his direction adorning a stunned expression, Rei just gently smiled at her. It was not an easy feat since he was quite nervous, but he was a ninja and acting was a fundamental skill of his profession. Thankfully, Pakura considerably relaxed after seeing Rei's calm smile and shuffled a bit closer to Rei. The duo started to snack on the sandwiches while looking at the sunset painting the Yuzushio orange in pleasant silence, their hands still connecting. So, this time it was Pakura who started speaking. She sheepishly avoided Rei's eyes. This is actually the first time I am on a date with anybody. Silence again descended on the duo, making the time awkwardly drag on until Rei decided to. Nay, Pakura? He hummed, getting her attention. Let's just act like usual, okay? Fine. Pakura chuckled and amusedly shook her head. To think Conan would forbid us from discussing anything work-related. Yeah, I don't think that will work for us. Right. It's actually my fault. She sighed, but her eyes stared into the distance in a nostalgic way. I have nothing but Maki and my work. From an early age, I was led to work hard for my village. Pakura, get stronger. Pakura, our village needs you. Pakura, you have to support the village. Pakura, your Kekiai Genkai. Her lips twisted into a distasteful mocking smile. I had never time to have a normal life. Even Maki was literally thrown into my arms with orders to train her to the best of my ability because she showed a promise. It wasn't even my own decision to take her in as my apprentice. She sadly muttered. And now, work is the only thing you know and love Maki as if she was your own. Rei amusedly hummed in acknowledgement while putting his arm around her shoulder and pulling her closer to him. We all found it a bit strange that you don't have even one hobby or interest. You just spend all your time on your duties as my Jonin commander. I am actually very happy about getting the position, you know? It consumes just enough time that between training Maki and focusing on my duties, I don't have time to think about the betrayal of KasiCair. You know, at some point, it will come out that you are alive. You will have to face it one day. Rei gently reminded her, but to his surprise, Pakura just took a refreshing breath and brightly smiled in a way as if a burden fell from her chest. That will not be a problem, she assuredly stated. As long as I have Conan backing me up, nothing is impossible. I am sure she would be able to persuade the KasiCair higher-ups I am dead, even if I stood in front of the council itself. All she would need was their documentation of my apparent death. She snickered. After seeing Conan's mind at work in political manipulations, Pakura really pitted any village trying to make problems for Rei's lands through diplomacy. Cheers to that, Rei smirked and reached into the basket, pulling out 2 bottles of water before handing one to Pakura. Honestly, just as Tsunade is scary good at the economy, Conan's niche is politics. That's actually why she was sent to Konoha for the negotiation instead of Tsunade going herself. Among other reasons. Speaking of which, Pakura's eyes gleamed in interest made of schadenfreude as she excitedly turned her body towards Rei. I heard you got news from her yesterday. How does the negotiation with Konoha go? The second it was decided the emissary will be Conan, it was an established fact that Konoha is fucked. What remained to be seen, however, was what mood Conan will be in during the negotiations. Mei and Tsunade even bet on how much Conan would make Konoha suffer. Needless to say, Tsunade lost the bet. Her guess was too small. Rei quipped. The negotiations are almost wrapped up after these 2 weeks. They only discuss some minor unimportant things now, so Conan will be returning quite soon. According to Conan, it was quite dramatic. In the end, she only managed to secure a reparation payment of 1 billion Rio. He nonchalantly said with a shrug. You heard me correctly. Rei smugly smirked. We both know that Conan is a miracle worker, alright? But, how? 1. Such a sum is no small matter for a village. That kind of... Pakura couldn't help but feel flabbergasted. Conan promised to give Konoha a 50% discount on the products of the Bairi company for the duration of their debt, considering they were given 10 years to pay the reparations. I see, Pakura grimaced, now understanding why Konoha was fine with accepting such an exorbitant price. It wouldn't be impossible to actually profit if they took advantage of it. Buy in bulk and then resell. Rei simply snorted. Do you really think Conan of all people would let Konoha screw with her? Oh, I am sure the Konoha Council and Hokage think they are smart, but I know Conan. She already sent a proposal to ration the goods sent to Konoha with her report. This discount given to them doesn't work for Konoha. Instead, it is only for goods sold on Konoha's territory, meaning if Konoha decided to buy elsewhere, they will have to pay full price. So Conan wants Tsunade to cut the number of goods sent to the Konoha territory by 50%. Pakura inquired. It seemed logical to her. This way, there won't be any loss, only an abundant profit, but Ray quickly put that notion to a sudden stop when he amusedly shook his head. She will cut the supply by 3/4. Ray gleefully stated, and Pakura shuddered when she realized the implications. Oh, Konoha is so fucked. They will actually have to buy from elsewhere for full price at this rate. They sure are. They thought they would be able to waive the contract in front of our company and demand goods at a dirt cheap price, and Conan is using exactly that arrogance. Sure, the contract does state we will have to sell our goods at half the price on Konoha's territory, but there is nowhere written we are obliged to deliver as many goods as Konoha desires. And without being able to resell our goods, Konoha won't be able to make the money to pay for the reparations. Hence they will have to use what they have safely deposited in their coffers. That is actually a very insidious scheme. Damn, Conan is ruthless, using only a single hole in the contract to make Konoha pay almost 2 times their annual income. Pakura leaned closer to Ray, her eyes sparkling in glee. Ray blinked and his eyes slightly widened. It was only now he realized they somehow got too close during their heated talk about the negotiations. Pakura's face was basically just a few inches away from his, and her body was pressing itself into his side. Ray, seeing their position, made his mind. Here we go. Let's make it count. Leaning forward, he kissed the startled girl. Needless to say, the remainder of their date was spent in silence as the two enjoyed each other's lips, their conversation about work long forgotten. Days slowly passed and Conan returned, almost glowing with happiness. The monetary payment was but one single thing among many she managed to negotiate, and honestly, Conan thought this was the performance of her career. To name a few results, Konoha's ninjas were forbidden to enter the Land of Snow. If even one ninja belonging to Konoha was found within the territory of the Land of Snow, it would instantly become a matter between daimyos of Snow and Fire, and the Bairi company would take the side of the daimyo of Snow. And with it, the other countries. The Hokage would disband the root organization for good. Well, Ray didn't put much faith in Hiruzen of all people, as he was almost sure Danzo would just screw with him anyway and keep Root active out of the sight, but officially Root was supposed to not exist anymore. The best part, however, was that all villages and countries now knew Root is disbanded, which basically meant that if even a single Root agent was caught and confirmed to belong to that organization from hence on, Konoha would be shit out of luck with their own daimyo, due to the diplomatic shitstorm it would cause. Sometimes diplomatic pressure can be much more devastating than brute force. At least, Danzo would have to be more discreet and careful in his operations from now on, and as such, nothing would go as smoothly or quickly for him as it was up till now. And since the massively overpriced payment was mainly compensation to the Land of Snow and the Yukimi clan, Konoha naturally had to compensate Yukigekure too, since they were the main victim whose founding clan was kidnapped. Conan complained for days about how much nitpicking went into it. She knew exactly which techniques she had to ask for, and by the end of the negotiation, copies of at least 100 D and C rank techniques were handed out into her hands to be given to Yukigekure. Within those, there were even some high-ranking ones such as shadow clones. Sure, Tsunade brought the technique with her when she moved the Senju library into the mansion in Rei's dimension, but now that Konoha handed it over to Yukigekure, Rei can simply buy the technique from Yukigekure, and nobody can say he stole it from Konoha when the ninjas of his future village use it. After all, shadow clones was a strictly regulated and safeguarded technique of Konoha, so having a foreign ninja using it would create some friction if there was no justifiable reason for how exactly it was possible. As for the low-rank techniques, of course, they would get to Yukigekure only after Conan made copies. Needless to say, these were all techniques whose presence lacked in the Senju library. They would surely be useful for someone after being put in the library of the new village. Honestly, tricking Konoha with the discount for the Bairi goods was just icing on the cake. Not a week passed after Conan returned when she received a missive from Hokage, requesting a bigger supply of goods in the Bairi shops located in Konoha. Reading it, Conan simply blew a raspberry and with joyous laughter cut the supply by an additional 10%. Even after the Kyuubi incident, losing a lot of lives and having a part of the village completely demolished, Konoha was still considered the strongest, and while there were attempts to usurp this place, they failed. Nobody could have guessed it would be a simple reimbursement and greed that would actually make Konoha fall from their grace, paying double their annual income in 10 years' time frame. The budget for Konoha grew even tighter than it was before, and many of the rebuilding projects slowed to crawl. The richest village was officially having financial problems, and for the first time since its creation, the Fire Daimyo had to send monetary support to Konoha apart from the standard funding. The higher-ups of Konoha became the laughingstock of the decade, while the name of Nakona became the equivalent of a devil who dethroned Konoha from its position of strongest via giving them a discount. Conan's alias sent shudders through the leaders of various countries and hidden villages, even more than Madara's name. After all, no matter how scary the legend Madara left behind was, Conan could make their life very unpleasant for a very long time very fast with a bright, innocent smile. After Conan's return, she was especially glad that Pakura and Rei became a lot closer, even though it made her disgruntled that the thing that bonded them was their work in the village. Here she put so much effort into making them not talk or even think about work, and they dared to completely ignore her. The worst part She could not even call Ray a workaholic, because he just made sure to spend most of his time with her or Herb's sisters, despite his heavy workload. It was as infuriating as it was flattering, really. Tsunade, on the other hand, complained about Konan's negotiation in Konoha because the fire daimyo was writing one complaint after another. At first, the guy was full of giddiness when he heard about the discount Konoha would be receiving. After all, the Biribiri didn't just deal with seals for ninjas. They had various luxury goods, electrical appliances, gadgets that made life easier. Nobles and daimyos simply loved having them, and the fire daimyo most likely already saw himself with his new and cheaply acquired goods. But then, the supply to Konoha was cut, and one very happy daimyo became a very angry and unhappy camper. He literally camped his own desk in his office, and spent his time writing letters to Tsunade, who was the current head of the Biribiri company under her alias. Needless to say, Tsunade was flabbergasted and exasperated, not knowing what to do. The Senju clan always had good relations with the royal family of the Land of Fire. There was a lot going on behind the scenes between the two, and it had a lot of importance, but on the other hand, the fire daimyo had no idea that the head of the Biribiri was a Senju. Plus, weakening Konoha, as distasteful as it sounded in her mind, was a good step for keeping the world balanced. Somehow, the second Konoha lost its place as the strongest hidden village. The other villages didn't descend into a frenzy and try to attack them. No, the other Kages actually seemed content with the situation and just sat tight on their asses, focusing on developing the economy of their own villages. Heck, nobody was even arming up as the purchases of weapons dropped by 5% despite them being ninja villages. In the end, the fire daimyo had to just suck it up, and because Tsunade refused to budge.